And we're live with a couple of J's, but I only mean the first letter of their names because one's an INFJ and one's an ESFP. And we're going to be talking Enneagram Type 7 with Jonathan and Jeff Miller, who will be the centre of this video because it's about him.
Hey.
Okay. So, Enneagram 7, that's the, it is a head type. It's the enthusiast, it's about having fun, it's about seeking pleasure, it's also about avoiding pain, and avoiding anxiety, if possible. So I was not prepared for, I should have been prepared for this.
I will have a look for a graphic.
Right.
That's okay, I'm never prepared for anything, so it's fine.
So if we...
Sorry?
So I know something we can talk about right off the bat because
Well,
we said anything about head type. This is like the first sort of conflict I see between Enneagram and like Myers-Briggs, for instance, because you've got, the Myers-Briggs would say head versus heart is like T versus F.
No.
But then in Enneagram, of course, they don't do it that way. So explain to me like how I can be such a feeler in Myers-Briggs, but then be considered a head type in Enneagram.
Yeah,
What's the difference there?
Head type is different from thinker and feeler, and Myers-Briggs. It's more of it's about being out of touch with your instincts and your inner convictions. So you're relying much more on analysis, on caution, and then being empirical. Like the thing with a 7 might seem quite enthusiastic, but they are actually, in a certain way, they are quite careful and they are quite analytical in their own way. They're analysing the environment for things they can enjoy and also for things they can avoid. So it doesn't quite mean the same thing as a thinker in Myers-Briggs, especially since, of course, the 7 from the descriptions is not what you think of as a thinker. They can enjoy learning and they can enjoy intellectual discussions and so on, but their main purpose is to have fun, and depending on the type and depending on the person, what that means will be very different. It won't necessarily be the same interests as your stereotypical thinking type or your stereotypical NT or anything like that. Unless they're an ENTP, of course, because the ENTPs are very often type 7. If that clears up anything.
Not much, I guess. To be honest,
I'm
still not quite sure what those terms mean in contrast.
I'll go a little bit. I'll try and make the bridge. So maybe you could say that because Jeff does, because he said in previous videos that he does a lot of things on how things feel. It's sort of like gut feeling, but gut feeling in terms of like FI. So I wondered if that could be classified as a head thing, in that you are like you're making a judgment call, but using FI rather than a logical thing.
Yeah, it's all tricky to nail down exactly what the Enneagram is talking about here. There's more of a sense of the head types are the ones that are most unlike the body types. That's their contrast, and the body types are about power, they're about control, about not being controlled, they're about imposing their will and so on, and for good or bad. The head types don't feel that sense of inner power in the same way a body type does in theory. So they're more about they're more cautious in a certain way when it comes to, for instance, their confidence in challenging authority. Like the head types, 5, 6, and 7, all have issues with authority. So they all have different ways of dealing with it. Type 7s prefer to avoid authority where possible. They don't necessarily like it, but they think authority can be over there, do its own thing. As long as it doesn't bother me, unless it really matters, as long as it doesn't bother me, fine. but they don't necessarily have the confidence in challenging authority, or standing up to it, the way a body type in theory does.
I can see that changing a lot, depending, because like ESFP, you don't want to cramp their freedom.
Yeah, but that's what I said. It's type 7s and ESFPs are usually 7s.
Yeah.
It's not that they like authority or anything, or they definitely don't like being challenged or being controlled, especially when they don't like being controlled. But in general, they would rather not confront authority directly. They would rather authority stay out of their way, and authority issues stay out of their way. They're not going out of their way to confront authority or attack authority the way, say, a 6 might or a counterphobic 6 might. They're more. It's like they're pretending that authority doesn't exist.
Okay. What do you think of that, Jeff? How do you approach authority?
I would agree with that mostly, I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm not. I've talked about before. I'm not really a big fan of like conflicts or confrontations with people, except like there are times that it feels good to do that, but it's not as much anti-authority in that case. This is just, it's more like the rush of the experience itself. It can feel good. But I don't do it as much as I would if I didn't know that it can hurt people's feelings. So I always consider that too, and that for most people, even people that I don't like, I still don't try to hurt people. So there are times where my instinct is to confront people more than I do, because I also have an instinct not to hurt people, and those kind of like cancel each other out sometimes.
So, Jonathan, is Jeff Jeff considering people's feelings? Would that be in Enneagram saying, oh, he's in his head thinking about not?
Well, I would say that's more of an ESFP thing. Like, obviously, type 7s are almost always the EP types in Myers-Briggs, so ENFPs and ESFPs make me more considerate about people's feelings. ESTP7s and ENTP7s aren't they don't necessarily go out of their way to hurt people's feelings, but they might be just a bit less considerate of them. And the less healthy an Enneagram 7 is, regardless of their type, the less they give a damn about other people's feelings, the more selfish and self-absorbed they become, the more they care about how they feel and how they can avoid pain, avoid frustration, and enjoy themselves where possible.
If you really like tag a function on things, it's like it's either TI or FI, and both of those are subjective. So you can say both of those are in the head, like feelings in the head or logic in the head. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get back to Enneagram. So what are the? If we go over, I'll try and get the table up of the Wikipedia table of because I think that's what we did in the first video or the second video. Because that's a video Jonathan could do with you in future, Jeff, about his type and faith.
Well, sorry.
Yeah. Well, right. I've got to go. That's it. Enneagram. Way things are organised or not organised. Enneatypes. No, it's not in Enneatypes. It's in Visual Aids. That's it. Visual Aids. And it's going to be Enneagram 7. Oh, right there. There's a table. Right, so I'll open the table, and then Jonathan can explain the various things in the Enneagram table. Oh, and generally though, Jeff has been good at showing that, and when he's talked about the SP temperament, really it's about freedom for him. Really is about freedom in everything. Freedom in the political sense of the word, but also in the freedom to be creative in little things, wherever it's to put his own twist on things, his own touch, as much freedom as possible.
Yeah.
But still get stuff done that has to be done. Right, so I'll just put this on. This will give us some structure. Right, so this is.
Yeah.
We've got this little table here. So these are the things you could explain.
Yeah, this will help.
So what's all this about the planning, ego fixation? How does that apply to ESFPs?
Yeah, I don't know. This is more of their weakness or their dark side.
Ooh.
Planning is more, well, it says here anticipation, so it's planning how to enjoy yourself. It's planning how to have fun. What am I going to do next? What do I want to do? What can this do for me? How can I get pleasure out of this situation? So on, that kind of thing. It can be, and the problem with this is obviously it can be quite a selfish attitude, especially as they get less healthy. They become more selfish. They become more about what about me? What do I get out of this? Right? And that's again also that's a reflection of how they're a head type.
Right. So Jeff, I get the impression that you don't do it. I get the impression, Jeff, that you don't plan fun. That if you have to plan it, it's not fun.
Yeah, planning is a really weird phrase, I think, in this situation. It's not what I would automatically think of, but
I think the only time planning is fun is like where the making of the plan itself becomes a fun activity, where it's less about actually following a plan as it is like just something about that in itself is fun. Like I've noticed that sometimes since I've, when I reach the years where I spent more time on the computer than before, that I would like the act of going to whatever it is I was interested in at the time. Like for instance, when I got into Doctor Who, to use something Ben knows, I sort of made myself like a schedule of like watching the episodes in order, and I would go to there was a website called Doctor Who: The Complete Adventures, and it included things besides just the television stories. It tried to fit like the other forms of Doctor Who media into all one narrative. So when I was getting the audio stories and stuff like that, then I would tell me like where they're supposed to go in there. So I would go to the website and and copy the names of that and then put it into my schedule. And like doing that itself, that was the fun thing. And the thing is, like, long before I finished actually doing or listening or watching that stuff, I got into something else more and I didn't follow the schedule. But it was when I was doing that, like I enjoyed the activity itself of just doing that process of, lining up the stuff. And my mom always said that one thing we had in common, despite being very different personality types, is we both like making lists, but we kind of do it for different reasons. But we also both do enjoy that action of just making lists of things for whatever reason. It's always just appealed to us. And for me, probably, when I was a kid, I did it for things like, I would notice like a magazine like TV Guide or Entertainment Weekly or something would have lists of like the top television shows or the top selling albums and things like that. And so I would kind of make my own lists or my own charts of things. And so I was always into that. And then when I started hearing radio countdown shows, I would make my own charts for that too. So things like that were always fun to do. Even if they didn't lead to anything else, it was just the action itself of that was fun.
Right.
So it's, you don't mind planning for yourself, but it's when you have to follow other people's plans that can be a problem.
Yeah, but I've grown to appreciate some other people's plans for some things. So, like all of the planning that my mother used to do for things like trips, vacations and things like. Because there's a lot of stuff as kids we got to do that was fun that we wouldn't have been able to do if we had relied on our own, just doing what popped into our heads, because the timing involved in getting to the right places at the right time it requires some planning that that we wouldn't have done, not just because we were kids, but also just our natural personalities were not um, to plan ahead and work all those things out. It just sort of like so I became thankful in retrospect that my mother was as organized as she was in terms of those type of things, because there's stuff that I got to do that was fun that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Right. Well, what I can do is, because I've got the Riso and Hudson book, and they've got a little outline of the Enneagram 7, and it is so it's head type. It is 259, and I don't know if Jonathan can get to this bit. So for instance, it's got the right key motivations. Here we go. Want to be happy and satisfied, to have a wide variety of experiences, to keep their options open, to enjoy life, amuse themselves, to escape anxiety. Does that sound like you, Jeff?
Yes,
Yeah.
but the funny part is, of course, that when I hear something like that, my feeling is, isn't everybody like that?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, who wants to have anxiety and not enjoy their life? Isn't that kind of universal?
Well, for example, a type 6. Type 6 is kind of stuck in anxiety whether they want it or not. With them, it's more, though, they can rely on anxiety, they can feel like their anxiety at least is keeping them vigilant, is keeping them alert to other dangers and things like that.
I'll give Jeff an example of a type 6. So like Woody Allen character or George Costanza is usually cited as a 6.
Yeah, so
I mean, it sounds really guardian,
hmm,
always being worried about things. I
yeah,
know not that would all of one wouldn't be, but still, I
yeah.
mean, yeah, I've known plenty of people like that in my life, and I don't understand how they do it, like
I think
worrying about things all the time.
I think it's more like most people probably wouldn't mind the type 7 attitude or things, but they're kind of afraid of it in a way. Like they're
Yeah,
afraid of what will happen or how it makes them look, or they see it as being irresponsible, or again as they're worried that danger will happen because of it, or that they should be doing something else instead of that other responsibilities. And also, people just have different ideas of what fun would be as well.
yeah.
Yes.
I've talked before about how there's so many like songs and movies and things and just stuff where the message or the theme is uh, stop worrying about the future and enjoy the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I always was like puzzled by like, why do people actually have to be told that? Because to
Yeah.
me it just seems like that's the natural thing. I'm more like, you have to tell me to remember to take care of responsibilities, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
really do that naturally, so I don't tend to. But that doesn't mean that I don't worry about things. But when it happens, it's just basically things that are obligations, because
Mm-hmm.
they feel like a burden on me. So I want to get the burden off of me. And I guess there's two ways of doing that. One is to actually deal with the obligation and take care of it, and the other one is to put it off in some way where I can set it aside where it's not on me anymore. And so generally I would probably do like whichever of the two of those is the easiest to do. But not always, because obviously sometimes it's harder to deal with it, and I have to do it anyway. So, but it's naturally my instinct to avoid obligations when I can. And the other part that some people don't understand about that is when I say obligations, I don't even just mean like work or something that would be considered difficult. It can be something that I enjoy doing even. But the more that it is scheduled, the more that it's expected of me, of this is a thing that you are going to do at this time, the more that it feels like an obligation. So even something that I enjoy doing, like, I'm on a kickball team, for instance, and so I'm, playing sport. I'm, it's a fun thing to do. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't want to because it's voluntary. It's not something anybody forced on me. But the games are scheduled, and there's times where the day of the game I don't feel like going to the game, and it's not because I don't enjoy playing. It's just because the more, since it's a scheduled thing, it's like it feels, oh, I've got to be here at this place at this time, and the more things are like that, the more they feel like a burden. So that's the thing I think that I most would have to explain to people, is that it's not even just about like obligations as a like chores or work things. It's like even fun stuff can feel that way, and the ultimate thing is, the ultimate life would be just being able to do what I wanted to do whenever, and everyone else would go along with what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it.
But one of the peculiar things is it's Jeff who tries to keep me on schedule when we're doing these reviews of Blake 7 and Homicide Life on the Street.
Can I say, though, I actually related to all of what Jeff was saying there, that kind of resenting, even when you're planning something for yourself, you end up getting annoyed with yourself for planning it, or being frustrated when it comes because you feel like doing something else, you don't feel like doing it. I can get in that quite a lot.
Yeah, and that, what Ben just said, to me it's not as much that I have any desire to make Ben follow a schedule. It's more like...
For my own good.
Yeah.
It's just more like I have a schedule that I have to follow whether I like it or not, just because of the life I lead. I have a job. I have, and if I don't get to sleep earlier, then it makes everything else the next day worse. So, and that part of it is actually on me, but then it's like if I'm going to do something, then it just needs to be earlier in the evening. So, and so many times it hasn't even been about another person. It's been my own lack of self-discipline in getting myself, to bed on time and things like that. And then it's hard. Sometimes it's hard for me to sleep even when I do go to bed because I've got... I explain that to somebody as like, not wanting to let go of the day.
Yes,
because
I have a bit of that as well.
Sort of giving up.
I dread it
sort
sometimes.
Of giving up and being like, oh, I'm there's things I could be doing, but I'm gonna sleep instead, and it feels like a waste of time.
Jeff, when you wake up in the morning, do you feel it's a relief to wake up?
A relief to wake up?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Oh, you must have better dreams than I do then.
I almost never want to get up when I'm, and it's not because I want to sleep for like 20 hours or something. It's just that it's too early. If I always said, like, if I could, if I could just make everybody else push them back like 4 hours or so, instead of the workday being like 8 to 5, it would be 12 to 9 or that would be fine.
Maybe what you could do is you could get a job in California, but it'd be like a phone-in job, so like you're on their time zone or something.
Yeah, well, if I could get somebody to you know, pay me for like voice acting or something like that. These days, they, you know, some of those people record their stuff on their own computers and send it, you know, over the internet to California or wherever they're doing the production of it. So something like that would be great.
I've got something here like Visa and Hudson's, because they like do massive in-depth. I mean, like, so for instance, they've got they would do like they do about something like 25 to 30 pages on each type, and you're not going to get MBTI profiles that are that long. I think the longest one I've seen is like the Kersey one in personology, which is like 17 pages on the INTP, and it really isn't even on the INTP. A lot of it is digressions into stuff that he's interested in, like so it's got like, this is an outline of the 3 levels of the Enneagram 7. Because people might get the impression that an Enneagram 7 is just someone who likes to have fun. So this paragraph here is like what a Enneagram Type 7 at their best is like. So I'll read this bit out. Highly responsive, excitable, enthusiastic about sensation and experience. Most extroverted type. Stimuli bring immediate responses. They find everything invigorating. Lively, vivacious, eager, spontaneous, resilient, cheerful. Easily become accomplished achievers, generalists who do many different things well. Multi-talented, practical, productive, usually prolific, cross-fertilizing ideas of interest. At their best, assimilate experiences in depth, making them deeply grateful and appreciative for what they have. Become awed by the simple wonders of life, joyous and ecstatic. Intimations of spiritual reality, of the boundless goodness of life.
Yay.
That's the ideal.
Yeah. So really, that's more about how they want to.
Yeah.
It's better to contrast that with the average and unhealthy 7s. Basically,
yeah.
The average and healthy ones, I'm sure you get to, they're more easily distracted. They're more trying to numb pain. They're trying to enjoy themselves. They think they're enjoying themselves, but really they're not. They're doing things like they're getting addicted to things, or they're missing out on the important stuff in life. So a healthy 7 knows how to really have in-depth, enjoyable experiences, knows how to manage their time better, and so on.
I mean, if you're an Enneagram 7, it's like you're really well off if you're a musician, because then you get to make the thing you love into something that can earn you a lot of money. And so, like Jess said, the performer temperament, like being an actor or actress, a musician, a performer.
It's not really about having lots of money. It's more about the depth of the experience. It's like less healthy 7s have more and more shallow experiences, whereas healthier 7s have more in-depth experiences, and they're really enjoying it rather than pretending they're enjoying, or thinking they're enjoying it, when they're really just getting annoyed with, when they're just trying to drown out their own anxiety, their own fear.
Could you give us some examples? Because that sounds a bit vague.
Like a drug addict, for example, would be a Type 7 drug addict would, they get more. Their first fix might be fantastic, but the more and more you take drugs, the less and less enjoyable it becomes, and more it becomes about having your fix, having your drug, not really enjoying yourself. Eventually you become really selfish and miserable and self-destructive. And you're not even enjoying things that you might normally enjoy. You just get really focused on very shallow fixes. Whereas a healthy Type 7 might have. I think one of the examples Jason doesn't give is that of an average 7 would be like they would go on holiday to a destination, and there's all these things they want to see, but instead of seeing them, they end up doing a whole bunch of other things. They get easily distracted. They end up missing all the important things that they wanted to see in their occasion. Whereas elders, everyone would go do what they wanted to do. They're better at planning their things out, and they're staying in one place and drinking it in and enjoying themselves. Rather than going from this to that, that.
Right, I'll say a bit what. Oh, wait a minute. Do you have anything to say on what Jonathan just said, Jeff?
Well, I think I'm somewhere in between on that because I am easily distracted, but there are things that are more important to me, so I always try to make sure that the things that I really want to get done the most that I do, but I don't always. I mean, sometimes things happen and it just doesn't happen. But there, one thing I was thinking about what I was saying earlier, about like the enjoying the experience and stuff. I think that I enjoy most experiences more than some people probably think I do. But there's two factors that sort of keep my outward excitement from showing as much. One was the way I was brought up, especially my father, and kind of discouraged expression most of the time. And so I had that kind of working against that. And then also the other one is sort of cultural or societal, like the often places I am, like in the workplace and I guess just, the places I've been around more people have been situations where too much excitement or kind of outward expression is sort of frowned upon, or not even necessarily frowned, but just thought of as weird. To contrast that with the times when I've been in things like theater productions, where it was sort of like I was with my own people, and the kind of expression that comes naturally to me in enjoying things was more encouraged and more people accepted it. There wasn't this feeling of, what I do or say is going to be judged as being, too strange or whatever, because I'm expressing excitement, because I like to be in environments where, expressing the joy of the experience is a good thing and an accepted thing, and not something that's looked upon as an odd thing. Unless that in itself is entertaining. So it's like I sort of what I've done is I've adapted to those environments where, like at work, I am the goofy one, but I'm still only so much. It's to be known that way, but yet not so much that it's like people are like, oh, I can't work with this guy because he doesn't take anything seriously or whatever.
A phrase that came to mind when you were talking there, Jeff, when you said amongst your people, the phrase that came to mind was free spirits.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's natural for, I don't know if this is everybody, but it seems like it would be a lot of people to sort of feel like they think there should be more forms of, if everybody would, I hear this a lot where somebody says something like, if everybody would just be, more X, whatever the X is, then I think, the world will be better, or whatever. You hear people say that.
Yeah.
And what it usually is something that's they value, but it may not be something that a lot of other people value. So in my case, the thing that I always think of is that if people were more open in their expression about how they are feeling, what does make them happy, what makes them sad, what makes them angry, and there weren't all these hidden agendas and mind games and all these other things going on, I feel like the world would be a better place. Again, that's my feeling, but I know that other people believe that would be a bad thing. So it's like those kind of competing feelings about stuff. But that's my instinct, is to be like, why can't everybody just express themselves naturally of what they're feeling, and then everyone knows where they stand with everybody.
Yeah, that pitfall there, the be like me. Why can't everybody else be like me?
And that's the thing, is that I don't, that in itself I don't feel like I want everybody to be like me, because then if everybody was like me, then I would have no way to like stand out from the crowd. You know, I don't want to conform to a crowd. So it's not that I want everybody to be like me. It's more like I want everybody to express themselves in whatever way is good for them. And then if they did that, then people would know, you know, where they stood. That's the way it feels to me.
And also, you've said that sometimes if you say you're in a group and they're all like a load of ESFPs, it's like, whoa, there's no way to stand out. There's no way to be the center of attention because everybody else is trying to be the center of attention.
Yeah, that's sort of I mean, there's sort of a natural competition that comes up when there's a lot of people similar together, and so I think with people, that was the downside or the negative to being in things like the theater groups and stuff, is that there was a more natural acceptance for the way that I express myself, but there was also more of a feeling of you have to do something more outlandish to stand out because there's everybody's trying to do the same thing.
And when you said they're outlandish, do you almost feel like you're pressured to like go into a zone that you don't really want to go into? Sort of be unnatural in order, like you said, like be more outlandish, where it's like, I don't really feel like going there because I want to be true to what I feel's right.
I think I guess to relate it to something that everybody would kind of know is like a lot of times in the entertainment industry in general, whether it's music or acting or whatever it is, sports, you have that thing where, you know, the latest headline will come out about, you know, such and such said whatever, you know, whatever the thing is, it's controversial statement by whoever. Well, whenever that happens, you have like the people that react, oh, it's so terrible what this person said, or it was so offensive, and then you have a bunch of other people kind of defending that person, you know, expressing themselves in that way. You know, it's their right to express it, and people shouldn't worry about that and stuff like that. But what happens is every time one of those things happens is it sort of changes the standard a little bit, where the next time somebody does that, if it's just the same as the last one, it doesn't get as much attention. So it's almost like within the, you know, entertainment, like if you're not doing something that grabs people's attention or makes them bothered effectively, then you're losing your edge or you're losing your spot. So people, there's like this competition almost for, and I'm not saying it's an organized thing, like they're getting together and saying, okay, how do we do this the next time? It happens naturally, but it's like what I'm talking about, where, you know, somebody like Kanye West, you know, he's made a lot of the stuff he said.
Okay.
But the thing is, it's like with him, you know, it's like whatever the latest thing he said is. Now he's done that so many times that now it's like, oh well, there he goes again, just, you know, saying the thing. So it's like he doesn't necessarily have the same edge with people because people are expecting it. And so for him to get people's attention by what he says, he's got to be really extreme, because if it's just sort of a little bit controversial, then everybody is like, oh well, that's nothing new.
Yeah, it's because they've already judged him as not a nice guy who looks like he's got, what is it, swallowed, what's that expression about, swallowed the wasp or something? He's always got a negative expression on his face.
I don't think it's as much about being nice as it is just the things he says, you know, offend people in some ways, but because he's done that so many times, it takes a more extreme statement on his part to get anybody's attention. If it's just a typical, if people are like, oh, that's just Kanye being Kanye, then they're not as, that doesn't create as much of a buzz. So from an entertainment point of view, he's got to come up with something stronger or else nobody notices.
I think...
So you think he's doing it on purpose?
Yeah, but if it's like...
Well, but yes and no. Like on purpose in the extent that the instinct in him is most likely to do that. So it's not on purpose as in necessarily like he's sitting down and planning it out like, oh, here's the next level of offensiveness or whatever. More like it's just he's instinctually knows that if people stop paying attention to him, he has to do something to get their attention. So that's what I'm saying, is it's sort of a natural thing that happens in people that are entertainment people, regardless of whether they're professional or not. It's just in those of us that kind of have that instinct of being performer type people, is that we always want to be doing something that gets people's attention. And so if we're not getting anybody's attention, then we have to come up with something better or something that's stronger in some way.
But I think, though, he's going to the dark side. There's loads of performers who get attention with positives, with the light side of the force, where they can get attention.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm not making a value judgment about it. I'm just talking about in the instinct itself.
Right. See, I don't think he's a nice enough person in order to grab the attention through wonderful charisma, and like say Bill Clinton, when he was at his best, he grabbed attention through his charisma.
Yeah. Or
people who generally have a great personality, they don't have to do like negative things and say negative things to grab attention. It depends what they're
well, it's some people are better at than others, and so much of image is creation of the reaction to what people do and say. And so there's a lot of media sort of creating an image for someone. You could have you could take two different people and say, well, these quotes, were attributed to these two people over a course of a career, and see how they would be interpreted differently based on who that person was, because that's about image. And so I don't know. I'm not with Kanye West in his personal life. I don't know how he is around people. I don't know whether he's a friendly guy. It's what he does in his personal life is not really my business. I'm just mentioning him as somebody that, as an example of somebody that gets attention often by what he says, because the words he says or what he talks about are controversial in some way to people. And so I'm giving that as just an example as somebody that, because they have that image, he's not going to get as much attention by just repeating the same stuff. And so, yeah, in general, I think that instinct shows up in people that are entertainers naturally, that they're always looking for a way to entertain people. And if there's not an opportunity for that in doing the same thing, then they're looking for a different way to do that. So for me, I have times when, again, my job is not an entertainment industry job. It's an office job. And so my opportunities are much more limited, but I try to use whatever opportunities I do have to kind of take those little opportunities to entertain people. I'll do impressions of the people that I work with for them and stuff like that. I do things that are like those little opportunities to find ways to make people laugh and make people enjoy themselves in the office. It's like the way to get through the day. And so I know that if I just did the same thing every day, there are some people that I work with that they kind of like things to be the same every day. But I also realized that it wouldn't make as much of an impact if I didn't change things up a little bit, if I always did the same thing, because they would stop noticing it because it wouldn't really stand out anymore.
A little bit behind the scenes info is when I made that, I just wrote in the side, "I'll let you get in, Jonathan." And now
I've got nothing.
Nothing to say. But we'll go over the I can go over the average Enneagram 7.
I was actually going to. The other thing I was going to say was Kanye West. Kanye West now sounds like a sexual 8, but that's for another time, I think.
Yeah, but it's part of it with. I don't know enough about him, so.
Yeah, me neither.
Here we go. But I'll just say one thing about on celebrity is that we noticed this in England is it's the people who are not fantastically talented who have to resort to these sort of things in order to get attention. So it might be, say, the actress or actor that isn't brilliant but might have to do certain things to grab attention, whereas those who are really good don't have to do these things they can just be nice, or if say boring almost. Whereas there are others that have to
I
sort
would
of
agree
do
with
this
that, but
thing.
I would say even the most talented people, they still are expected to do it in a different way.
Hmm.
For instance, like musical acts where,
Yeah.
if they get really good critical reviews, they say, "Oh, this is a genius artist," and they put out this fantastic album and it's one of the best ever. Then there's expectations placed on where when they come out with the next album, it's expected to not just be the same as the first. They have to come up with something different or present in some different way where they can say, "Oh, well, they raised the bar,
But
or they did something that elevated their place in the industry or whatever it is." Like if they come out with a second album that people say, "Well, this is just a repeat of the first album," then nobody says it's brilliant and genius anymore. They say, "Oh, well, they're one trick pony. This is all they can do."
but
So
but generally, a lot of fans like um they would like the stuff to be just the same, and they almost have to be coaxed along by the people they're fans of. Like with the
yeah,
Prodigy,
it's kind
they
of
make
it's
you
kind of a
like
balance.
something.
Kind of a balance, I think, because you have people that'll say, "Oh, well, we want it to be different," but then not too different because
Yeah.
they don't want it to be unrecognizable as the thing that they liked in the first place. And so that's kind of the tightrope. It's back to part of what I was saying is where you have to be able to know what you can do that gets people's attention, but then it's in a way that it still benefits you. So, I think of, say, a band like U2 that is known for making albums that are different from the last one. They try to do something different than they did in the last album. And some people, that in itself they appreciate. There's other people that are like, well, you had a good sound with the Joshua Tree. Why didn't you just, make more albums like that? So you have both reactions. And so you kind of have to have a balance if you're going to continue having a good career. So that's what I'm talking about is like sort of the challenge of finding that way to stay relevant to people where you can still entertain them and still be successful in some way. It's not often done by just doing the same thing over and over again, but sometimes it is. I mean, last month I saw a stand-up comedian, Stephen Wright, who's been around, for several decades now, and his he does write. I actually noticed he had written more new jokes than I thought he would, because often when I'd heard him in the past, he told so many of the same jokes, and so sometimes it does work to kind of repeat the same thing over and over again, and then it's still popular. So, but it's hard. I think it's harder to find something like that. I think there's less people that are able to find something that continues to work that well for years and years than
But
those
like
that have to keep changing it if they're going to stay in the public eye.
there was a thing like there was called like Monty Python Live at the Hollywood Bowl, where loads of these American fans just want them to do the same sketches.
Oh yeah, and so but they're rare, I would say,
Yeah.
among things like that. There's not too many groups of people that's the case with. Yeah, there's people that every year go to like Rocky Horror Picture Show things where they act out they dress up and they act out the movie and stuff like that. And so there's things like that that do draw people in year after year where it's the same thing. But I would say that's the exception rather than the rule. That more often than not, you have to change things up to continue to get people's attention.
Right. And so now we'll go over the I'll do the average. As appetites increase, become acquisitive, materialistic, worldly wise. Right, Jonathan, what does that mean? Worldly wise. I thought worldly wise was a good thing. What do you think it means by that? Become worldly
Maybe,
wise.
maybe it means they think they're all wise, but they're not. That's what it sounds like in the context. Because I agree with you, it does sound like a good thing, but it sounds. In context, it sounds more like they think they're all wise, they think they know stuff from their experiences. And they think they've done it all, I suppose. but they're not as wise as they think they are.
Right.
That could be that. Could be that.
Okay, so I'll put become acquisitive, materialistic, worldly wise, in quotation marks, constantly amusing themselves with new things and experiences. The sophisticate, connoisseur, and consumer. Money, variety, keeping up with the latest trends, important. Become hyperactive, unable to say no to themselves, to deny themselves anything, uninhibited, doing and saying whatever comes to mind, storytelling, flamboyant exaggerations, wisecracking, performing, fear being bored, so keep in perpetual motion, but do too many things, become superficial dilettantes, conspicuous consumption, and all forms of excess. Self-centered and greedy, never feeling they have enough, demanding and pushy, yet unsatisfied, crude, jaded, addictive, hardened, insensitive. Now the reason why it was getting bad there towards the end is there's like 3 stages. There's like 3 subdivisions within the average.
Yeah. I think one of the first term you used was appetite. Some appetites. There's a few words like that. It's because the vice of a 7 is gluttony, which is not just eating too much or drinking too much. It's also about having too many experiences to numb your pain and so on.
And we can give an ENTP example, Jeff. Remember with the story? No spoilers out there, but Planet of the Spiders, where the idea that the Doctor's greed was for ideas, new experiences, because they had a sort of like a Buddhist theme to that story, Planet of Spiders. I suppose it's just not an addictive personality, I suppose.
Yeah, and it contrasts with the 8, especially the sexual, because the 8 is actually about lust. So the 7 and the 8 can both be about. They can both have that sort of thing where they're enthusiastic and enjoy experience and so on. But with the 7, there is a slight bias towards distractions and numbing pain and not being bored and so on. Not necessarily enjoying things because you really feel like doing them, I suppose.
I think you touched on something, but I've noticed something that when the Enneagram 7, type 7 is at their healthiest, is they like doing things that lead to a certain feeling. And when they become less healthy, they sort of go towards these things that are like shortcuts to get to that same feeling. And some of those shortcuts can be like substance abuse or things, and it's like a way to cheat it to get to that result.
Yeah.
Rather than doing like the thing that truly gets to it, which is more enjoying life, rather than taking a pill to get the same result as enjoying life. When the genuine thing, where the drug is like a pale imitation of the genuine thing.
Yeah, and another thing about 7s is they're optimists. They tend to look on the bright side of life, but they'll do that even if they're less and less healthy and they start having a very bad idea of what the bright side is. So a healthy 7 integrates to type 5, and they learn to explore the darker side more and kind of confront their anxiety a bit more and go into stuff they don't necessarily enjoy, but that is interesting nonetheless, or that will enrich their experience in an intellectual way, I suppose.
Right. So when you say to someone, so when you just said there, 7 goes to 5. So what practically what does this mean? That the 7 learns to examine themselves more, to look at themselves more closely, to examine their darker side, maybe? What does it practically mean? What does 7 go into 5 mean?
Well,
in concrete terms.
In concrete terms, it means that unhealthy 7s are sort of the sort of person who will avoid other people's bad experiences, and they'll avoid the darker side of life because it bothers them, and they'd rather go off and do something they do. So it's not like let them eat cake sort of thing, or well, if they're seeing riots and stuff outside, they'll just close the curtain and do something else. When they're going to 5, they learn to confront the darker side and to explore it. Maybe they'll read books about tough subjects, for example, or they'll be more tolerant of people's darker experiences, and they'll become more interested in weightier subjects and in tougher subjects, and in the darker side of life that their normal instinct is to avoid, and they'll learn to become more tolerant of it and to incorporate it into their enjoyable side. Like, for example, I've asked in the Facebook groups a few times whether Type 7s, which type would enjoy horror more, a Type 7 or not. Would Type 7s enjoy horror? And generally the answer is no. It's usually the 6s that enjoy horror. 7s do sometimes enjoy horror, but I was consistently told no, 7s aren't really into horror that much, or if they do, it'll be like a taste. Like they'll watch the occasional horror film, or they'll dip their toe into the dark side, but in general they'll prefer stuff that's maybe a bit brighter or a bit more enjoyable from their point of view.
So, go on, Jeff. I was just saying, what do you think of that? Because I know that Jonathan was saying there, like, more healthy 7s that will like look at them. So, for instance, I mean, like, there's quite a bit of darkness in Homicide: Life on the Street, and Jeff, I think, enjoys some of that darkness and some darker episodes, and like episodes that have emotionally moved him. And but like I said, he wouldn't want too much of that, and so and he avoids watching something like Special Victims Unit because it's just like too dark continually. So, you want to talk about that, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't like dark stuff. I don't see the show Homicide as being dark for the most of it. Now, it can be emotional.
Yeah.
But it's not. When I think about dark stuff, I think about stuff that like revels in that.
Grimdark.
Like, to me, what Homicide does is, it points out that the detectives are somewhat jaded to things because they see it every day. They see murders all the time, so they're not going to be emotionally involved in all the cases and things like that, although sometimes they are. But it still allows the audience to have a connection with, the emotions that are going into all the inner workings of a case and all the things. But it doesn't like... It's not as much about like this making a psychological game out of things like murder. Like, it's not a show like that. I have no interest in shows that try to make and I hesitate to use the word glorify because I think that's overused. But there are shows that it's like they revel in the darkness. It's like the thing it's about. They get enjoyment out of exploring these, twisted kind of viewpoints and things like that. And I don't enjoy shows that do that, and I don't think Homicide does do that.
But you do enjoy.
Yeah, there are certainly plenty of situations where there's something sad that's happening or something that's troubling, but it's done in a way where it explores the reactions to that, and more than anything, I think that the reactions are very natural. The characters, the way they establish them, that they're all very believable human reactions to things, and in that case, it's they're trying to do a job, and they take their job seriously, but the job is to try to solve the case. It's not to try to figure out the inner psyche of everybody who commits murder. you know. So
you've-
that part of it is not as important as the facts of the case.
but in a lot of things you've watched, you've talked about that you can get emotionally moved
Oh
by
yeah,
things that
sure.
you've watched, and I'm wondering, so why do you think you like to be emotionally moved, or is that just a given of the type of your
Well,
type?
I don't always like it, but I guess it goes back to what we were saying earlier about the full experience of life. I mean, that to me, if you're not moved by things, then what's the point? You know, that I mean, I have to have an emotional connection to something, otherwise it doesn't rise to the level of being worth experiencing or talking about. If there's no connection to it, if it's just sort of this thing that's happening, then I don't feel any motivation to do anything.
Right, Jonathan, is that a good sign? That someone who's in any type 7 wants an emotional connection, is that a good sign?
Yeah, it's probably a good sign. It's also, it says more ESFP though. I'm not sure how. I suppose TP types might. It's a good sign when they want more emotional connections. So I suppose it's good anyway. But I'm not sure how much Type 7 really means to. Is it good in the sense that Type 7 is something the most selfish, one of the most selfish types? So the healthier they are, the less selfish they become. The more interested in other people and those emotions and experiences. Like they know it's not just about them.
Right, so now we can go to the real dark side, and this does get dark. So unhealthy. Right. And Jeff might be able to give some examples of some Hollywood people that may have become like this. Become offensive and abusive while going after what they want. Impulsive and infantile. Do not know when to stop. Addictions and excesses take their toll, leaving debauched, depraved, dissipated escapists. In flight from self, they act out impulses rather than deal with anxiety or frustrations. Go out of control, have erratic mood swings, act compulsively, manias. Finally, their energy and health is completely spent, become claustrophobic and panic-stricken, often give up on themselves and life, deep depression and despair, self-destructive overdoses, impulsive suicide.
Do you want to talk?
What do you think, Joe? Anyone come to mind? Like, I don't know if this fits.
Sure. I mean, hundreds of people you could talk about that as far as like celebrities and things, but you and I have talked about before that the objection that I have to just using the word impulsive as if it's always a bad thing or
Yeah.
And that that one of my favorite lines, and please understand me too, was the saying that artisans are impulsive, they like being that way. When I quote that, I usually put "like" in all caps.
Yeah.
Because it's like the part about to be feel truly alive is to be follow the impulses. That's what we want to do. That's what I said before about a life without obligations is the best life in terms of feeling like whatever the next thing, the next action is a free variable. The next thing I can determine now what I'm going to do, and I'm not bound or obligated by anything. So again, I realize that there's a lot of other people that don't see it that way, and they frame impulsive actions as being a dangerous or but it isn't always. So it's that those things taken to the extreme can sometimes become that if they're not checked by anything, but they're not inherently a bad thing.
Yeah, it depends on
But
the
yeah, I
impulse.
mean, as you were saying that, I think of, you could name 100. I mean, I thought of Charlie Sheen and Judy Garland and people like that that are, are seen as being you know, that they were self-destructive in many ways, and there's obviously plenty of other examples. Or just ones popped into my head because the people that I've, you know, known plenty about and related to in many ways.
So it's going to be. So it's not impulsivity per se. It's what the type of impulses are. Like for instance, your type of impulses are showing people a good time and involve other people.
Yeah, it's so much is dictated by circumstance. I mean, and you follow your impulses when I was talking earlier about how I felt like expression was stifled by my father, by other people that have been authorities in my life. When that's not the case, when you feel like you can express yourself and it's rewarded or it's accepted, then you don't have to do the more extreme behaviors because you already have a comfort zone where you can have joyful experiences and it's appreciated. But for people that are in environments where that's not the case, where they are either there's no limits placed upon them at all, or the limits placed upon them are very restrictive and they feel like they have to lash out in some way because there's no way to express yourself in a way or follow your impulses in a way that can be beneficial, that everything has to be, you know, something destructive because it's like you're not getting any kind of positive response from people, then that's what leads to more destructive behavior. And so circumstance plays so much a part of it because, I mean, in one of the people I mentioned, Judy Garland, I mean, she had people that were trying to control her life so much because they were trying to profit off of her.
Mm.
And what she enjoyed was the performance. She loved performing, and what the studios in charge of her performances wanted, what the management and the companies, you know, were like, this is what we want, and you have to do these things, and they would start her down the destructive path by, you know, giving her pills she had to take and say you have to do this so that you'll be able to show up on time, that you won't be too tired, and that you won't gain too much weight. And there were all these things, demands placed upon her, and structures of, well, you have to do this in order to fulfill your contract and all this. And so it forced so much pressure on her that it was like the times that she wasn't actually performing, then the rest of her personal life was very much in upheaval. And there was a lot of lashing out and a lot of impulsive stuff that was just because she felt like she was like trapped and had to bust out of the prison, you know. And so she would do that, and then the behavior would be destructive to herself and people around her. And that's the kind of thing, is when circumstances place a bunch of pressure on you, then it's natural for at some point it's going to burst.
Right. I just noticed a famous name here in the list of people that have given us Enneagram Type 7. We've got John F. Kennedy, but the one that stuck out to me, Robin Williams, they had listed as Enneagram Type 7.
Yeah. Well, with Williams, I want to say that people think he committed suicide because of depression, but it was also because he found out he had an incurable brain disease. So it wasn't just, there was depression, there was all his debts and so on. There's all his history of drug addiction, there was all those things, but the final decision was actually that he was going to die any time, and he just wanted to. Part of it was he wanted to go out his own way. That's a bit of a misunderstanding people have.
So was it a brain condition where it's like, I don't want to deteriorate. I don't want to be in a situation. I don't want to be in that state.
I think
of deterioration.
It was part of that. I think it was in the situation where he learned about it, and he learned also that the really bad symptoms were coming round the corner, like just months or even weeks away. So that may have been. Yeah, that's what I heard. That's what I heard from his. I think it was his wife. So obviously, I totally agree he was a 7, and I totally agree that throughout his life he had the ups and downs of the 7. But the actual suicide in his particular case was a bit more specific to his situation. Yeah. One thing I want to mention is that Jeff was talking about control, about how Judy Garland was being controlled. That just relates to the disintegration of a 7, because the disintegrated type 1, and type 1 is, of course, stereotypically we like control. What happens when a type 7 disintegrates to 1 is they feel like, usually it's because they feel like people are trying to control them, and if they can't avoid that, they can't avoid it, they can't evade that, they will try and control other people back, or they'll try and control people that they can control. If they can't control the people who are actually trying to control them, they'll take it out on others. As a way of asserting control over their life, more or less, or to stop others controlling them, where possible.
I think there's a couple of paragraphs here which are good in this book, and it refers to another bit that I'm not going to quote because it's from a philosopher, so it will start off a bit weird, but I think there's 2 good paragraphs. Some of those blessed with the sweetest pleasures of life are in fact not racked with emptiness, loneliness, and self-hatred. Some are truly happy and know how blessed they are. Then there are those who seem to be quite happy, at least they think they are, but they are merely amused and distracted, grabbing after the pleasures of life rather than experiencing happiness on its deeper levels. Finally, there are those who, despite having everything, are bitter and disappointed. For some reason, the possession of wealth and all the good things of life has not been enough for them. Why the difference among these 3 kinds of people? All the personality types are faced with the issue of how to use the world to its best advantage. Although the 7 is the type which most exemplifies this universal problem, how to enjoy pleasure without living for pleasure, how to possess the good things of life without being insensitive to the need of others, how to live in the world without getting lost in it. For better or worse, the 7 lives out these questions. So it's it's that thing of, like I said, it's like doing things which bring pleasure, and maybe the pleasure is like incidental to the thing that they're doing, and then they're like just trying to go straight for the pleasure, and they cut out, like trying to do the shortcut to that, to go to the thing that has no depth. Trying to shortcut the experience is sort of like a cheat towards it. Right, so what I can do that, we can go back to the table of Enneagram 7. Some of the things that are on here. Now, what happened earlier on is I've had to change my mouse because, Jonathan, what happened is during the Vitgalenko hangout, while I had the screen up and my sound off, I spilt some iron brew on my mouse, and now the the scroll wheel won't work. So these are the things that can happen behind the scenes. So I've had to switch mice to now readjust it to have the enthusiast. That's interesting. Holy idea wisdom. What does that mean for an Enneagram 7?
Wisdom 1. I think that's okay. Touching that, that's things like going to 5 and learning about being wise. Also, healthy 7s and being wise about how they enjoy themselves. Being wise about what they really enjoy and what's really good in life, and how they can enjoy themselves without being selfish. versus more shallow experiences. And again, I think it relates somewhat to the 5 thing of being more tolerant of the more darker things in life and darker knowledge. That how it doesn't have to threaten their enjoyment or their pleasure or optimism. How it can be incorporated into it and enrich it.
I think one of the things Jeff notices well is when he talks about he will talk about types when mature, when they've matured, and when they're immature.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for you, Jeff, what is maturity?
You mean for me personally?
Yeah, and in general, like when what are the things that you point out to say, oh, this is a mature person because of such and such?
Well, I mean, for me, I had to get to a point, like I think my really sort of point of maturity where I put someone else's needs ahead of my own, and some, I could, it'd be real easy and a good story for me to say, well, as soon as I had a son that, well, I became mature. And in a way I sort of did, in the sense that that was a point, because it's maturity is not just one, you wake up one day, you're mature. It happens naturally, as you get older. But that having a son and then becoming a single father led me to be confronted with some things. And when my mother told me she couldn't give me any more money, then that was kind of the point in my life where I really had to say, okay, I have to figure out something to do, because in the past, and my general instinct is to take the easy way out, kind of cop out of things. If somebody will bail me out of something, then I'll let them do it. And that was the first time where basically it was nobody was going to bail me out. I had to figure out a way to take care of not only myself but also my son. And so at that point, I had to do things I didn't really want to do, like, go back to work and get a job that I didn't want to do because I had to support us. So, I consider that to be a certain kind of maturity, because if I just sort of said, well, whatever happens, happens, and it's not my fault that, somebody else owes me something, or whatever. If I had that attitude, then to me that would be immature. And if I kept that attitude, even when confronted with things where I had to take responsibility, and I chose not to anyway, that to me would be continuing in immaturity. So, but I have seen those moments, like with my son's maturity, in the way he handled things for school. For instance, I used to always have to get him up for school, and it was hard to get him up, and it's like a chore every day, getting him to school on time. And this year, he's taken it upon himself to get himself to school on time, almost all the time. So I consider that to be, a certain maturity on his part, that he realized that for whatever reason, that he is going to try to get to school and finish school. So in order to do that, he has to start by getting there. So, things like that, where it seems like a simple thing, but I know, because I've been through the same experience, that it's not. That when you do have obligations, and you have the things that you don't necessarily really want to do that much, but you recognize there are things that doing the thing you don't want to do will benefit you in the future, and you just have to trust that, then that's, to me, is a sign of maturity, because it's not easy to do things you don't want to do when you don't see the immediate payoff of it.
But I think you also notice it though in other people, like in certain types, like you've talked about, like with any type, especially with, like, say, NTs. Like, you've noticed how NTs can change when they get older. and you'll say, well, that's the difference between an immature NT and a more mature NT.
Yeah, I mean, just in a general sense, I feel like younger NTs tend to have more of a kind of a smug kind of arrogance to them. Like they think they know everything when they're in their second year of college and stuff like that, you know. Oh, well, now I've learned everything. So, and they might not necessarily say that, but that's the attitude they convey. Like you couldn't possibly convince them that they're wrong about anything. You know, if they are wrong, it's well, they haven't you know, gained the full knowledge of whatever that is. And what I've seen, you know, more maturity in NTs, it seemed like, is they recognize, or they're more willing to admit when they don't know something, or more open-minded to other points of view that they haven't necessarily considered. And even people that are still very strong in terms of their own beliefs and their confidence in their intellect or their ability to be rational thinkers, or whatever you want to call it, they're still open-minded enough to that they'll consider other points of view rather than always trying to be, you know, sort of ramming their point of view through somebody. So, you know, I have a coworker that's an ENTJ, and like we have very different points of view, but we can have good conversations because he'll consider what I say and not just dismiss everything offhand, you know, like, oh, well, I know more than this or than this person, so, you know, this person's not my intellectual equal or whatever you want to call it, so I'm just going to dismiss what they say and not, you know, consider it anything. And I think younger NTs are more likely to do that, where they kind of have this, oh, well, this, you know, this doesn't immediately go into my view of what the logic of this is or whatever. I don't see the use in it, so I'm going to dismiss what this person or this source says about anything because, you know, I haven't, they don't pass my test or my threshold or whatever. So I think that kind of softens a little bit with age and experience, you know, that kind of, and then that's another thing in general. Like, I think the younger somebody is, the more their world is sort of encapsulated into their limited experience. And when you get older and you have more experiences,
Yeah.
even if you don't necessarily travel a whole lot of places, but you at least are open to, you know, something like the internet giving you the opportunity to communicate with people from all over the place, you know, and you're open to other people's points of view, and you pay attention that there's all these different ways of looking at things, as opposed to kind of just staying in your lane, so to speak, and just saying, I only do this one, I follow this one path and I don't explore anything else. You know, I think there's a certain amount of maturity just in doing that, in terms of expanding your base of knowledge or experiences, and being open to what other people tell you about. And that in itself is kind of, I think, adds to maturity for any type.
I think a lot of people, I think with NTs, as they go along, they will, a lot of their, is they're like a big fish in a small pond, and then it's like when David Cozy Jr. said that when he got to a point where he was working, and like David Cozy Jr. is a very smart guy, but he was like working with people who were like so smart, he didn't feel as smart as them. Because you start moving, it's like you're going up the leagues. And so they start getting a bit more perspective of, well, there's all these other people who know more than me, and in some way are smarter than me. And so, you know, I suppose that's part of it on an intellectual level. And then there's also emotional maturity, I suppose, as you mentioned. So we can say that one is the holy idea of the wisdom. Here's an interesting one. The fear, being trapped in pain and deprivation.
Yeah, that relates to the anxiety and the fear of the type 7s, and also the disintegration of one to one. It's just they don't like, as I said, they tend to be quite optimistic and they don't like the darker sides. So, but obviously they do have anxiety and they do have fear, and everyone has to life can get dark and their lives can get dark. So what they really fear is not being able to get out of it, to not be able to see the brighter side of things, to get stuck in a really bad situation with no way out, or to have all their anxieties overtake them to the point they can't really enjoy themselves. Or deprivation is. This is also how they're almost always SE DOMs or NA DOMs, because they're looking for things outside themselves to stimulate themselves. So deprivation would be there's nothing, it's not there anymore. There's not enough to stimulate them and to get them out of their mode, whatever.
So Jeff, you just mentioned this in a previous hangout, but I don't know if you've seen it, Jonathan. Like the I called it something like tyrannical spy dad, something like that. Jeff will call it something different if he puts it on his channel. But and he went into the examples of how controlling his father would be in certain situations. So. So is it like the deprivation of, as you said, the fun, the things that bring joy in life? A deprivation of joy.
Yeah, more or less, and deprivation of joy and deprivation of interest. I would say that when it comes to controlling people and personalities, sometimes are probably it's such people to the point where controlling people are almost always bad regardless of who it is, but some types and some sizes of people are probably clash with them more than others. Type 7s don't necessarily know how to deal with controlling people, I would say. And they can feel when they're under stress, they can feel very easily frustrated by that sort of behaviour, and it can kind of get in a vicious cycle where it feeds in itself. I'm not saying that controlling behaviour is good or anything like that, but it's very easy for a 7 to make it be especially intolerable if you're a type 7. I think.
That thing though about deprivation, maybe like, and Jeff was talking about if there's too many obligations, and they can like reduce the opportunities for fun, the opportunities for joy. Maybe if it's like you're too scheduled and too structured,
yeah,
you're not able to take advantage of these little moments.
Also, it can also be how each type can go when they go to their integration point, which for the 7 is a 5. They can go to the healthy side or they can go to the average side. And the average side of a type 5 is miserliness. They can be miserly with their time. They can be selfish with their time, and they can feel very easily drained by other people imposing on them or taking up their space, so it could relate to that as well. 7s can become quite, in their own way, they can also be quite miserly with their time and their freedom.
What do you think of that, Jeff? Maybe you've seen that in some ESFPs.
Seen what specifically?
Being miserly with time, like.
What time?
Miserly. It's kind of like greed, but in the sense of greed in the sense of I don't have a lot to give, so I don't want to share it. Being greedy with what you already have. In this case, your time and your enjoyment and your freedom. Your time, like.
No, I can't.
I mean, like.
Say that I really...
No, I mean, if other people want you to do stuff, and you think you don't have. If you want to do something else, you would. How do I put it? With 5s, it's more like Fives are almost always introverts, so fives almost always don't like to. They only have so much time for people.
Yeah.
So when sevens go to average five, it's sort of like they don't have as much time for people. They'd rather be doing their own thing, or well, they don't have time for people if it means enjoying themselves with other people, but they won't have time for people who want them to do something else or obligations on them, that sort of thing.
Of course,
I can't.
there are exceptions.
Relate to that part, no.
No. Alright. Could have got it wrong. Thinking aloud there. I've got a description of that actually.
Oh, when you said there's a good video for people to watch is like the Jeff did a video called "Extrovert Does Not Equal Social Wizard."
Yeah.
And, that's a very good video. I don't know if you've seen that yet, Jonathan.
Don't think I have. Okay, here's the description from one of the books. It's very short. Seven goes. Sorry?
I'll just say one thing: is that actually might show that the basic fear of being deprived, because. So, Jeff, if you say what the basic message was of that video that you did, called, like you were saying that ESFP really do need people, that sort of thing. If you explain that, then I think that links up with that.
Well, yeah, there seems to be this sort of false assumption in type circles that, like, introvert, extrovert, like, I guess because introverts tend to be maybe more introspective, so the people that are discussing this tend to be more introverts, and so they're coming about from that perspective, but they describe extroverted people as if they always have no problem making friends or finding people to hang out with, or that, they can always, they're always going to parties, or they're always got all these social, it's always like this stereotype of a social butterfly, whatever you want to call it. And I was just pointing out that it's not realistic for most people that they always have that's more of a skill, that people develop or circumstances that lead them to be able to do that, and it's not the majority of extroverts that are they just somehow are always good at doing that, and that people kind of, there's also stereotypes that extroversion is like shallowness, like, oh, well, they just want to go around having fun with people, so they don't have, so it's like this shallow existence or something, and it's less of a need. And what I was trying to stress was it's really, it's just as much a need. When I hear introverts talk about needing to have time alone, it's just as strong a need for extroverts to have time with people. Like that, that's where we get our energy from. And so it's the same thing in reverse. It's like how introverts feel when they have to spend too much time with people and they feel like they're trapped in a situation where they can't get that time to recharge alone. It's the same feeling. So introverts should know how that feels, because it's just the same thing. It's just the opposite experience. It's just feeling like, I've been alone too long and I'm trapped in that and I can't break out of it. I can't find a way to be in an environment that's comfortable for me to get my needs met or my energy replenished. That's the same feeling.
All right. Now, here's the average five. It's very short. Sevens go to average five. Sevens often feel it is their duty to entertain others and to keep their environment positive and exciting. Over time, this can be exhausting even for sevens. When they are tired of being on for everyone, they may choose to withdraw even from their intimates and seek seclusion and non-interference. This can cause a shock to others. They no longer want to put out energy for anyone else. They become almost obsessively focused and preoccupied. They can also be surprisingly withdrawn and isolated like fives. Their body language and aloof responses let others know that they want space and privacy. At such times, those make no effort to entertain or energize others. Like fives, they retreat from contact and attempt to restore their energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say probably ENFPs and ENTPs probably have more of a problem with that because of the intuition thing. But what do you think of that, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't think I do that very often because I'd always rather not be alone.
Yeah.
Now there are situations. That's the other misconception in the extrovert. Oh, how can you want to get away from people if you love people or you want to be around
Yeah.
people? It doesn't mean that we like all people or enjoy all experiences with people, because you can have people that are annoying or off-putting in some way, and it's like, well, I want to get away from those people. But it's not that I want to be away from people. It's just that those particular people that I have access to, are bothering me. But I, the true test to me and how I really knew I was an extrovert when I thought about my real behavior was because I will, like, at work, I'll go out to lunch with coworkers and that I don't necessarily enjoy the experience a lot, in the sense that often they're talking about things I have no interest in, and I'll find myself kind of bored or uncomfortable. But I'd still rather be there than eat lunch alone.
Wow.
Because if I'm alone, then the whole time I'm feeling uncomfortable. And if I'm with people, then there's a chance that I can find ways to enjoy myself. Like, there's sort of like an opportunity there. Whereas if I'm alone, then it's like there's no opportunity. I mean, the only thing I can do is like listen to or watch something else that gives me entertainment, and sort of just distract myself from the fact that I'm alone. So, but like, that's, I don't choose I don't choose that. Like, ideally, I would always be around people that I like.
No.
That's one of the benefits of the internet and Google Hangouts like this, is we can cast a wider net and seek out like-minded people, or
Yeah,
people.
that's true. I think the internet has probably increased the opportunities for everybody, whether introvert or extrovert, in that sense, because it allows us more control over our social communication. So when you're in person, like if you're invited to, some kind of dinner or something, you're in one location with those people. If you become uncomfortable being around those people, then at that point you have to make a choice. Do I stay and remain uncomfortable? Do I try to do something to change the comfort zone? Or do I leave? But the leaving is more, it's like, well, did I have a ride here? Well, I got away from my ride. Or, if I leave, well, then I can't come back. Or, there's all of these parameters on it, where online communication, often it's as simple as, oh, I don't like this environment, I hit the X button, And in some cases, you can go back in if you, at a later point, decide you want to do it. So there's a lot more sort of freedom within to sort of set the parameters of your own social interactions with people. Whereas in outside, in the real world, so to speak, you have more limits or more structure placed upon you, whether you like it or not.
Are there certain people who think, I wish I had the block function right now?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen, comics and things to that effect, where, that if you had, if real life was like the internet, how would it be different in terms of, and some things as simple as like games like The Sims, that had like you've got symbols above people's heads and stuff like that, and people talk about, like,
Oh,
like
right.
in the type communities, how would it be different if like people's type was on
Right.
their whatever they were wearing? Like, you walk around and you could see what type everybody
Right.
was.
As,
You know,
as
how would
there
that
ever,
change people's behavior? You know, their own prejudices or their own, you know, ways of dealing with people, things like that.
has there ever been a sketch of, say, an office where there's somebody who can't see everybody else and they can't see them because they've been blocked? Sort of like the real life equivalent of what Facebook blocking would be like.
I'm sure there
I'm sure
has
it
been.
probably has. Yeah.
I think I might have seen something
Somebody.
on YouTube, but I can't remember the exact thing.
Yeah.
I've seen similar things on YouTube at least.
Yeah, because when
Like,
something is ubiquitous enough and people come up with the same ideas for sketches.
yeah, I've seen.
Yeah.
There's a channel called College Humor that does this sort of stuff. It's got sketches like if Google was a guy, and
Yeah.
I'm leaving Facebook, which is just a guy walking in. If leaving Facebook was like real life, it's just a guy walking into a room saying, "I'm leaving, everyone," making a big deal at the fact that they're leaving Facebook.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. So I'm sure something probably has been done. Or very similar stuff has been done at least.
Yeah. Well, what we can do now is go back to the if people, you know, please subscribe and comment. But if you've got this far, people, you're good eggs. You're good eggs. Right, very good. So we'll go back to the diagram, give us a little bit of a structure, because I'm not the world's most expert person when it comes to Enneagram. It's something I know in the rough.
Mm.
I mainly concentrate on my own Enneagram type. And even that I don't know as well as I should do. I'm going to read it all in the Riso Hudson, analyse it, and then I'll read it all in the Chestnut book, and then I'll be like Mr. Enneagram 4. And even then, Jonathan will probably still know more than me on Enneagram 4. So, what we got here? Right, so, yeah, Jeff, if you could talk a bit about you talked about it in the video with your brother, but the sort of things where you felt that you couldn't do as a kid, like you said, because I know you sort of said, cause, you know, it was like, was it like you couldn't be spontaneous, you couldn't get attention to yourself or anything like that? What you gave specific examples in the video you did with your brother, but I just thought if you could give those again, then the audience would have like a concrete examples of the things that you couldn't do that you wanted to do, that your father stopped you from doing.
Oh, I mean, it was all kinds of stuff for that. I mean, there was a lot of like things we weren't allowed to watch on television. Weren't allowed to have cereals with too much sugar in them, or peanut butter with sugar in it, or you know. And as far as like music, like I wanted to share when I liked music. You know, to me, my instinct was share the music with other people. You know, sing and dance around and make up my own songs and just have a good time with it. You know, we had these bongo drums and I would play that. And, you know, that was a way to have a good time. And my father would always like say, "Stop making so much noise," and he would turn off the music. Like we had a stereo in the living room. And you know, I could have listened in my room, and I did sometimes, but I wanted to play it on the stereo because it was like I was sharing with other people. You know, it wasn't just for me. And then he would turn it off, and because he never liked my music, and it wasn't just that he would turn it off, as he always had to make some disparaging comment about it too. So, and then when he did that, then it was like doubly bad because it's like not only do you turn it off, but like sometimes he would turn it off and leave the room. And then I had a decision to make. Well, do I turn it back on and risk him coming back in and getting angry at me and punishing me for turning it back on? or I just leave it off, or I go back to my room and try to listen to it there. Like I was just whatever I did, it was like it was a risk, or it was like being defeated, you know.
Right, and just
And
so the audience knows, headphones were invented at the time of this story.
did you say were or weren't?
Were invented.
Well, yeah, I mean, but even that, like, I mean, that's the point. Is if I could listen to something just for me, but I didn't. It's not nearly as fun.
Hmm.
And so yeah, I did that sometimes, and I was so paranoid about my father's reaction because he didn't want us to have anything like what I do now. Every single night for all my adult life, I listen to stuff to go to bed. I listen to music, or I listen to stuff to go to sleep. But I didn't do that my entire childhood, like up to when I was still living with my father, because he didn't allow that. You didn't have noise of any kind going when it was time for bed. It was everything was off. So what I frequently did was once I had a little portable radio that had headphones, which I didn't have until I was, I don't know, 12 maybe. My father gave me one that he already had, and I would keep it under my covers and have the headphones on, and I would listen, you know, in my bed my father was a very light sleeper, and he would go to the bathroom in the night and stuff. So if I heard him get out of bed, then I would quickly take the headphones off and not only hide them under, but I also would hold the covers over the little red light on the radio so that he didn't see the light coming from my room if he passed by my doorway. Because if he
Hmm.
saw it, then he would probably come take it away from me.
Hmm.
Right. So you're going to have an extra, maybe more than the normal ESFP, an extra resistance to being controlled by people. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, at least from in my experience, um, you know, it's obviously going to be different from somebody of my type that grew up in an environment where um, their expression was appreciated and encouraged.
Hmm.
Uh, so here's the duh one for the Enneagram. To be satisfied and content. So we could. Uh,
Yeah, I mean that again though relates more to the healthy side of seven. Like
ah,
less healthy sevens are never satisfied. They're never content, and they might even see contentment as a bad thing. Like like it means to stop having fun, to not
right.
seek out new experiences and stuff because it's you know the end. Whereas healthier sevens have the rich satisfaction. They're learning to be more happy with what they've got and all the right stuff, and they don't need to constantly seek out just a whole bunch of different experiences and stuff every single second to avoid their feelings of being trapped and deprived.
So Jeff, do you think that's also a maturity thing? That the more mature, let's say ESFPs, they are more content. They.
Yeah, well, I think that's probably, you know, of whatever type people,
Hmm.
if they, um, you know, as you get more life experience, then you appreciate more what you have, I guess. I mean, in general, obviously not everybody does. Some people, till the day they die, are, you know, always complaining or saying that they don't have what they need, or, you know. Um, but I think a lot of people, they learn to appreciate what they have or the opportunities they have, and I did too. You know, I mean, I can talk about my childhood and the things that I was deprived of, but at the same time, I can turn around and mention things I got to do as a kid that there's plenty of people that didn't get to do. So I have that perspective now as an adult where I can say, well, yeah, I mean, my father may have shut down my expression so much of the time, but he also, you know, paid for me to play soccer and be in Cub Scouts, and he took me to baseball games and, you know, some things like that. So, I mean, he, one of the other things I talked about on that video with my brother was we would make model rockets, and he made a thing where we could shoot them off, you know, launch the rockets in the park. So, I mean, we had opportunities to do fun stuff, and I can look back now and I can both see the things that I didn't get to do, but also point out the things I did. So I have more perspective now, and just so. But one of those things I mentioned, like just being able to listen to music as I go to sleep, I don't take that for granted now because of the way I grew up. You know, the way of having someone that was so particular about this is the way things have to be when you're in this house. That now I am content with being able to do things like that. You know, it really doesn't take that much to please me in terms of like my daily life. Like I can enjoy my life, and I can talk about things I'd like to have or places I'd like to go as being cool things to think about doing. But I'm not constantly sitting around thinking about what I don't have or what what I can't do.
Mm-hmm.
At least not every day. I have my moments, of course, where I have more intense feelings of, man, if I could just do whatever, but it doesn't consume me. I am more content on a daily basis of knowing, okay, well, this is all the things I get to do, and my job really isn't that hard. I have, even within the company I work for, I can say, since I went in the office, it's an easier job than when I was working in restaurants. So, there may be certain things I miss about working in a restaurant, but overall, the office is a lot better because there's so much less pressures and things that I have to deal with.
Yeah, that was interesting. Like, so the next one, the temptation. Jonathan, can you explain a bit more about that? The thinking fulfillment is somewhere else.
Yeah, I think we've sort of touched on that. Is that in a way, it's the contentment and being not contented with what you have. More as what Jeff was saying, like temptation is just to think that what you have at the moment is not enough, and that or is not satisfying. That there is something out there that's better and more interesting that you could be doing, and that you should be doing to distract yourself or be satisfied with. Feeling unhappy with your life and your lot in life, or thinking that the grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Right. Jeff's given a good answer before then that sort of goes on that area. Oh dear. What do we say about the next one, Jeff?
Go.
For the vice and passion of
Gluttony.
Well, yeah, we've done that. All three of us have had that. Right.
Super. I like the.
But actually, Jeff is teetotal. Jeff is teetotal. So that's actually literally true, Jeff. Sobriety.
You lost me.
We're saying the virtue of type 7 is sobriety.
And the vice is gluttony.
Because but what did you say I was?
Teetotal. You don't
teetotal.
Drink.
You don't drink alcohol.
You don't drink.
Oh.
Alright. Yeah, it's just...
What does that mean, though? I mean, that sounds like it's a metaphor for something. What does it mean, Jonathan, sobriety? I mean, obviously they don't mean it literally.
Well, yeah, but it's the opposite of... In this case, it's obviously the opposite of gluttony. And gluttony, we say, is not just about eating too much or drinking too much or anything. It's about being gluttonous for experience and so on. So this is more like... these things can be about repetitive. This is contentment. Again, it's
It's more like resisting temptation of whatever.
yes, somewhat as well.
Basically, self-control.
Or not even, perhaps even not being tempted anymore in the best sense of the word. Like you've moved past temptation.
Oh, okay. So just like the ability to be content with what you have enough that like you're not constantly desiring more and more of things.
Yeah, and also what you have is healthy. You're not
Yeah.
you're not indulging in bad things or bad bad substances or whatever for bad experiences.
Here's something we got.
Yeah, I look at that. I feel like, and I don't know how much other people of my type would relate to it, but it seems like some do to an extent that I feel like I'm always right on the edge. Like I can say that I'm mature and like think, oh well, 20 years ago I was different, and in some ways I was, but it really wouldn't take that much to knock me back off. Like it wouldn't take that much changing in my life. Now I would still adapt, and I would probably adapt better than I did 20 years ago, but it's not some kind. I haven't reached some sort of holy plane where I'm unaffected by temptation or self-destructive habits or things like that. Like and when I reached those low points, like when I did the video Ben referenced earlier about extroversion, where I was in a low point in terms of feeling very lonely and unappreciated. If I'm in an area like that, then it would be real easy for if someone came along at that point when what I desired the most was just human contact and people who wanted to hang out and do stuff with me. Someone came along at that point and wanted to do things that were potentially dangerous or destructive behavior, I would be a lot more likely to do that when I'm in that point. So even if those things aren't necessarily what I would seek out when I was in my regular state, if I was in a feeling of so desperate for human relationship or social contact, then I would be more likely to go along with something that I wouldn't ordinarily do when I wasn't feeling like that.
All right.
These are the do's and don'ts of the Type 7. So these are pretty I suppose the grand visions is more for the ENFP. Enjoy my grand visions, but the other ones fit ESFP quite well. Have fun with me. Appreciate my spontaneity.
Yeah, have fun with me. Everybody, do it now.
And the other ones
Come on,
seem.
you know you want to.
The other ones seem obvious, like don't micromanage me. Yeah, don't micromanage Jeff. Don't ask him to do tedious things. This one I see as interesting. Be clingy or needy.
Yeah, so we talked about that one before, and that one I kind of disagree with to a point. Because now overly negative, I do have a problem with. But when people have described like clingy as being somebody like wants to be with you all the time or something, like I think that's a good thing. So I almost don't. I can't relate to that. I guess because I never have felt that somebody has been that way with me, that they've been too clingy. So I guess to me, that's a foreign concept to me.
What about too needy? How do you feel about people being too needy?
Again, it depends on what they need.
It's more like they're using you and they're putting what they want ahead of what you want, but they're using you to get whatever it is they want. They're using you, exploiting you for things.
It depends on what it's for. To me, it's very situational. Like there's some needs I don't mind ever meeting. Like if someone, didn't have the money to go out to eat, and I did, I'm always fine with taking somebody else out. Like that's not a thing to me that I'm ever going to be like, oh, well, that person's too needy because they never buy their own food. Like, I don't. Those things don't even cross my mind. Because I'd rather hang. I'd rather hang out with the person than have something like money get in the way of that.
Yeah, I think this is more like if someone really wants to be around you and stuff, but they keep on wanting to do what they want to do rather than what you ever want to do. Like, it's always about, they're making it about them, or they're trying to.
If somebody wants to hang out with me, I appreciate that so much that I'm willing to do things that I wouldn't necessarily choose if I didn't have somebody who wanted to hang out with me.
Yeah, this is more like if they did that all the time, non-stop, and they didn't care what you wanted ever. So
I've never really experienced that. So again, I don't know because I can't. Like I said, there are people that annoy me and that I don't want to be around them when they act in certain ways. And there's people that are consistently annoying where I'm like, I can say, yeah, and in general sense, I don't really want to be around that person. But usually that's in situations where I have to be in that place or that situation for some reason. It's not a choice.
Okay.
Somebody is around me because they want to be around me. That's different. Like, I have a much higher tolerance for something if it's a situation where somebody says, I want to do something with you. And, there are some things I just flat out don't do. And so, if somebody is like, hey, you want to go get a tattoo with me? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. But, I mean, if we're going to do something that I'd like to do after that, I don't mind waiting in the car while you go do that if that's what you're going to do before. I mean, but that's not my thing. So, so yeah, there's things that I don't want to do that I'm just not going to do. But it's not a matter of like, I guess all I can do is sort of imagine scenarios. Like, I talked about going out to eat. If it was with somebody that like, they always wanted to go to like a fancy restaurant where you had to dress up to go there. Then yeah, that would get a little annoying if that was repeated, because I mean I can do that every once in a while, but I really don't enjoy that much. I would rather be casual in how I dress, and and not have there be like everything all stuffy and fancy and stuff. I'm not really down with that, but I would do it for somebody that I really liked, but not at like all the time. So that's really the only thing I can really think of, because nobody's ever really made me do that. So,
yeah, the only thing I can add is, the only thing I can think of is that needy, clingy people like that are usually unhealthy 6s or 2s or sometimes 4s. If you want to, it would probably more. If you think of their type of unhealthy behaviour, that's probably the kind of thing you'd be in for. So, like, unhealthy 6s would be negative and needy, so that would be a thing. But yeah, I understand what you mean. I get your point.
The closest thing I could think of when you were talking about that was, there was one girlfriend I had where I wouldn't even describe it as needy. It was just, she was just overly negative. That's why I said that before. Like, she kind of wallowed in self-pity all the time. It was, everything was about how terribly, like, her ex had treated her and stuff. And at some point, I was like, you have to get beyond that. Like, I'm giving you an opportunity, and it's not in not a conceited way, like, oh, this is so fantastic, you get to go out with me. I wasn't even thinking of it that way. Just in terms of like, the things that she was complaining about were mostly the situation that he had left her in. She was pregnant and he had left her, and I was even willing to basically say, we have the potential to have a relationship where I would take care of your child that's not my child biologically. And there's a lot of, again, it's weird to say this without sounding like I'm trying to like hold myself up as some kind of hero or something. That's not what I'm saying. But like, there's a lot of women that would love to have a guy that would do that. That would say, you're pregnant with somebody else's child, I'm going to not only be with you, but take care of your child. And I was willing to do that, but she couldn't get past it. It was like, to the point where it dragged down everything. Every conversation was like she wouldn't get over the self-pity, and I'm like, you know, basically we can't do this because you have to get to a point in your life where you can get over what's happened to you in the past and get on with your life. And if I can't be with you if you can't do that, and so if that's a case of where you have to reach that point in your life before you can, you know, have a relationship with me, then that's what you got to do. And so that's why the relationship didn't last very long, because, you know, that so I don't know if that would be called needy or not, but to me it was more like just I don't have a much tolerance for people that just are all about self-pity. Like everything is just about how terrible they have it, and they can't appreciate what they do have.
All right.
Right. What we could do is next time, if Jonathan and Jeff have both enjoyed this, is we could do the instincts of Jeff. We wouldn't want to tag it on now, because the video would end up being too long. But
right now my instinct is I'm hungry.
Yeah. So this is like a summary of the Enneagram 7. So happiness, experience, accomplishment, sensual pleasure, material possessions, being amused and excited, having a wide variety of experiences. But again, like, it's when they go to the dark side, and if they go to like a substance abuse, which is a way of short-circuiting and taking a shortcut to get that high. But when like all of these things are good things, when you said a variety of experiences are good, like, you know what I mean? Like the high is a byproduct of doing something that is usually would say a socially healthy thing to do.
Yeah. And they are positive. The dark side, I think, of somebody like Chris Farley, where, according to those that were his best friends, he basically had to be reminded, like, I mean, almost literally once an hour, that he's funny and entertaining and a good person, that people like him. Like, if he went too long without hearing that reinforcement, he would get really depressed, and then that's when he would seek out dangerous behaviors like drugs and you know, getting prostitutes and stuff like that. And, you know, and just because it was like he had to have someone telling him that he was good and okay, and if he didn't have anyone doing that, then he had to find somebody who would, whether or not they were people good influences in his life or not. So
I just remember
the extreme of that.
I just remember the cliche that's actually true is that, so searching out what they used to call a quick fix.
Yeah.
A quick fix, rather than doing something that results in.
What I was trying to get across, though, is the reason I brought that up is because we all have that, and when I say we,
right.
I guess I'm thinking more of, like, you know, SFP types, but you know, it may apply to the type 7s as well, to a point. That it's like we all have that. It's just a different degree. Like I have the same instinct that Chris Farley did. It's just I'm in a better place in that I can appreciate better and don't have to have somebody tell me, like, once an hour that you know that I'm interesting or funny or that I make people laugh or things like that. Like, but I still do need that. Just I don't necessarily need it quite as often. Like, I can go a little bit longer on the good feelings of the last thing. So I think it's just a matter of scale. Like, some people, and maybe that's part of maturity too, like, can go longer without that reinforcement or encouragement. But we all have need, and that's true, I think, across the board for all types, is whatever it is that gives us the self-esteem boost, we all need that to varying degrees. It's just we have different things that go to our self-esteem.
Right. So So, how was it for you, Jeff? This hangout. Do you feel like smoking a cigarette? Was it good?
No, I feel like eating. I'm hungry, but
Right.
I would say that I think that from my experience so far, what I've read about Enneagram, my biggest problem with it is the stuff when they get into, like, it's the same problem I have with any of the type systems, when it gets too strict about, oh, well, this is what happens with this type, like, you know, this type, when they are stressed, becomes more like this other type, or, you know, and it's sort of like you're locked into this pattern, and I don't see it that way, and so that's my issue with any of this stuff, is when it's too, I don't know what the word is exactly, but too restrictive, where it's trying to fit everything into sort of a model of behavior instead of observing how things really happen and going based on that, you know. So that's just my perspective, is how it seems to me, you know, that there's nothing special about these particular numbers, and like what numbers are next to other numbers. Like, all that seems a little bit convoluted to me, and it may be that I just don't understand it good enough. But I would say, like, in this hangout, like, I don't understand it any better than I did before we started this. Is what I'm saying. So
Oh no, we failed in our job.
when the things that I understand, I still understand, and the things that I don't understand, I still don't understand, and I don't. I don't get on board with the, like, you know, well, it's healthier to move in the direction of this certain other number or something. I don't really buy that. So that's where I think it gets off track. But in terms of just describing, like, the basic, like, the needs and the pitfalls or whatever that were kind of in that, all of that I relate to a lot, and I think it's, you know, it's true. It's kind of interesting, you know, that it does relate to people across different, like, Myers-Briggs types within the Enneagram type, and it reflects differently, you know, kind of based on that. And so it's harder, I think, to generalize with Enneagram types. To me, it seems like it is, because you're dealing with very different ways of processing the information. And so it's hard. Like, for instance, you could say, well, you know, ENTPs and ESFPs are both often type 7s, and I'd be like, I can see that, but at the same time, I don't feel like I relate to ENTPs that much most of the time. So that's you know, if we're all in the same room, then they're still on the other side of the room. But some more than others. You know, I mean, when I did the video with I'm going blank on her name's Jen, but I forgot what she calls herself online.
Oh, Jen
anyway,
Dragon. Jen Dragon.
Yeah, yeah, that's right, Jen Dragon. Like, okay, she was an ENTP that I felt myself relating to more than,
she was nice.
many of the other ones I've talked to. But again, part of that is she's a theater person. So I get described way back near the beginning of the video. We've got that in common, and I could already kind of feel that vibe from her. You know, and she's not an Enneagram 7. I don't think. I forgot now what type she is, but
she says she's a 2, I think. 2.
Okay, so you know, so you would think, though, that if it was an ENTP, I would relate more to another type 7 ENTP, but then that's not necessarily the case. So I don't know. It depends on the individual. Some.
So what do you think of what Jeff said there, Jonathan, about this? I can
understand it.
No, I mean, like, when he talked about the numbers, I mean, have you noticed any type 7s going towards different numbers? I mean, how
I would say,
how true is that, the lines of disintegration and integration?
I don't know how true it is. I would say it's probably one of the less scientific aspects of the Enneagram. I would definitely say there's a lot more evidence, and the actual types themselves are a lot more convincing. I sort of agree with them in that sense. But at the same time, I do sort of see, I like lines of integration, disintegration, and I do find them, there's a truth to them, there's definitely usefulness to it as well. It helps with ideas of character development and character, whatever the opposite of character development is. And I can definitely see how each line of integration, disintegration would work and all that. But I do understand where he's coming from, because it's not very scientific to organize personality in that way, where like what it works. What coincidence it works like that. It works the way an ancient mystical symbol would organize it with. Yeah, but I don't. Is that sort of thing where it definitely works. I can understand it and appreciate it, and it's very useful. It's true, not necessarily for the reasons that perhaps it appears to be true.
Is it more true for some types than others?
I'm not sure. That's something I have to think about. Yeah. Again, all I can say is that you factor in type, also any type, and also the factor in the fact that everyone is supposed to have every type in themselves in some form. It makes a bit more sense. Like it's not that if you're a 7, you're not an 8, you're not a 9, you're not a 6, or that you do.
Yeah.
You have all these things. You're just a core 7. Your main type is a 7. So it's not that you cannot become more like it's not that 7 can't become more like a 6 or more like a 2 or anything like that. It's just I can see how it would be healthier for. I can see how it's healthy for them to become more like a healthy 5. In that sense,
I feel like I have a strong, from what I've read of the type descriptions, I have a strong 4 side in me. So I relate to a lot of the things in that. And even the name I've heard of, the individualist, like that. I describe myself as an individualist all the time, because that's a really strong principle within me, individualism. So.
Yeah. So we could do that in a future hangout. Maybe a 741 tri-type.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Because Jeff does have some red lines. Jeff does have some ethical red lines. There's not many of them, but they are there.
Well, I don't think that type 1's a monopoly on red lines. Like all, I just want to clarify that. So we can do a future one and try type. That'll be good.
Yeah. Yep. Right. So, I think that's about it.
Yeah.
I'm glad it went well.
All right.
Coming together. And so it's we can do a goodbye from each of us. It's goodbye for me.
Bye.
All right.
I don't know.